Everybody, in this video, we're going to talk about how to convert fractions and percents. So just as a reminder, a percent is a special fraction that has a denominator of 100. So when you're converting percents to fractions, like basically you just write it over 100 and then you simplify it if needed. Because 24% means you have 24 for every 100. And this fraction is reducible because they're both divisible by 4. So if I divide the top number by 4, I'm going to get 6. If I divide 100 by 4, that gives me 25. And 6 and 25 don't have any common factors, and so that is fully reduced. If I do the same thing with this percentage here that has a decimal in it, I get 9.25 for every 100. Make that decimal point a little bigger. And this is not even technically the way that we usually think of fractions because the top number is not a whole number. So to fix that, we're going to multiply by 100 because multiplying by 100 is the same thing as multiplying by 10 twice. And every time you multiply by 10, all of the place values shift one place value to the left. So 9.25, if I do 9 times 100, that gives me 900. 2 tenths times 100 is going to give me 20. And 5 hundredths times 100 just gives me 5 wholes. And then that will be over whatever 100 times 100 is. I think that's 10,000. And this fraction is reducible because 925 and 10,000 can both be divisible by 5. Or can both be divided by 5. So when I do 925 divided by 5, I get 185. And because that number ends in a 5, that tells me I could actually divide by 5 again. So I'm going to make this actually a little bit more efficient and just divide by both of the 5s at once, which means I'll divide by 25. So if I do 925 divided by 25, that gives me the number 37. And if I do 10,000 divided by 25, that gives me the number 400. And so my answer is that 9.25% is equal to 37 400ths. So the way you convert percents to fractions is you literally just write the percent over 100, and then you either reduce, or sometimes if you have decimals in the percents, you may need to multiply by something to make it so you only have whole numbers in the fractions and then reduce. But in general, it should be pretty easy, and it's pretty clear conceptually wise as well. So that's the way that you convert percents to fractions. When you're converting fractions to percents, you can do it in 2 ways. And it really just depends on what the denominator of the fraction is. If the denominator of the fraction is something that's really easy to multiply by to get 100, like 20, for example, then you can just use the equivalent fractions model and you can say, well, I know 20 times 5 equals 100. So if I do 3 times 5, that tells me that 3/20 equals 15 hundredths, which means that 3/20 is 15%. Most problems won't be like that because you really have to have special denominators for that to work. But it does work with some, like 1/2 or 1/5 or a tenth, or basically anything that's a factor of 100. If it's not a factor of 100, then the easiest way to do it is to convert the fraction into a decimal using long division, and then convert the decimal to a percent. So the way that I would calculate this is I would say, okay, well, if I have 4/15, that's the same thing as 4 divided by 15. And if I have 4 wholes and I try to divide them into 15 groups, that won't work. So I'll have 0 wholes in each group. And if I convert those 4 wholes into 40 tenths can be divided into 15 groups. And I'll have 2 tenths in each group, which takes care of 30 of my tenths that I wanted to divide. And I have 10 tenths left over. I'll take those 10 tenths, convert them into hundredths, and I have 100 hundredths, which makes sense because if you look at the place value of where this 1 is, it's still in the ones column, and 1 is 100 hundredths. So I have 100 hundredths, and when I split that equally into 15 groups, I'll get 6 hundredths in each group, and 6 times 15 is 90. So I'll subtract the 90 hundredths I took care of. And now I have 10 hundredths left, which I can convert into 100 thousandths. When I take 100 thousandths and split those into 15 groups, I'm going to get 6 thousandths in each group. Subtract the 90 thousandths that takes care of, and I have 10 thousandths remaining. And I could continue converting these into 10 thousandths and then take those 10 remaining 10 thousandths and convert them into 100 thousandths. But basically, this pattern right here is going to repeat itself over and over and over. And so 4/15 is equal to 0.26666666 repeating. And so at this point, you can take this and convert this decimal into a percentage. Now, you wouldn't want to do one like this when you're first starting out because converting a repeating decimal into a percentage doesn't really work with the methods we talked about in the last video. So in this case, what you would want to do is you would want to say, okay, well, I know that the percent is the part where you have a denominator of 100. And this place value right here has a denominator of 100. Because if I were to write out the expansion of this, I would have 2 tenths plus 6 hundredths plus 6 thousandths plus 6 ten thousandths and so on and so forth. But this one is really important because that's the one that has the denominator I want. And so I would think about it and I'd say, okay, well, I could make this one have a denominator of 100 by multiplying the top and bottom by 10. And that would tell me that I have 26% if I was only looking at that part. So I'd have 26%. And what we learned in our last video was that basically all of these place values have the same pattern. Like we would divide this by 10 and 10. So both of these would be divided by 10, which would make that 0.6. And then the next one would be divided by 100 and 100, which would become 0.06. And so we don't have to go through and actually do all those calculations to know that the rest of our number is just going to be 0.66666 repeating. And so 4/15 would be 26.6 repeating percent. And probably we would actually write this as 26.6 with a bar over it and then write the percent from there. So that's how you would convert fractions to percents. If you have any questions, let me know, and I hope you have a great day.